On the Minneapolis street where George Floyd took his last breath, where police officers kneeled on him for almost 9 minutes, they gathered, not to protest, but to pray. His brother Terrence pleading with those who across America are looting and being violent to find another way.
If I'm not over here messing up my community, come on. Then what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? Y'all doing nothing. Because that's not going to bring my brother back at all. Educate yourself and know who you're voting for.
Violence, he says, won't lead to change and is not what his family wants. They want justice. All 4 officers have been fired. Only 1 has been charged with murder. Now a private autopsy paid for by the family shows George Floyd died of asphyxia at the scene, and not just because 1 officer had his knee lodged on his neck, but because 3 others were also kneeling on his back.
What's his name? George Floyd! What's his name? George Floyd!
The outrage is a powerful force, and a week after Floyd died, it is still building. The National Guard is now mobilized in 24 American states, 67,000 military reservists on the streets, the largest number ever activated in the U.S. In Kentucky, a man was shot and killed during a protest. The National Guard and the police were trying to disperse. Tonight, President Trump doubled down on the demonstrators, who he has called thugs. He appeared in the White House Rose Garden tonight and struck a law and order tone, threatening to call in the military if more governors don't deploy the National Guard.
If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
Before President Trump appeared there in the Rose Garden, he ordered troops to fire tear gas at protesters, peaceful protesters who were gathered near the White House, so the area would be clear and he could walk across the street for a photo op, which he did after that little speech in the Rose Garden. Global's Jackson Proskow is near there for us tonight. Jackson, give us a sense of the tone and the message from the president tonight.
Donna, it was all about law and order, all about sending strong signals that he wanted to crack down on days of protest, activity that at one point in his speech he even labeled as being domestic terrorism. That was carefully timed to coincide with the crowds being cleared out from outside the White House. There were some warnings given to the crowd. Not everyone heard those warnings, but police advanced on what was essentially an entirely peaceful protest. There was no sense of this, but we did see National Guard troops and riot police fortify the White House grounds and then move on that crowd so suddenly so that, as you mentioned, the president could carry out that photo op across the street.
Jackson, you know, there probably are people in these crowds who are taking advantage of the situation and being violent and doing things. You know, a whole bunch of groups are coalescing around this movement. But there is real outrage in the United States over what happened in Minneapolis, over the death of this man. And is the president aware of that in any way and doing any messaging to try and calm that anger and offer some kind of solution?
The sense we've had over the past few days is that the White House does not have a message or a strategy when it comes to hearing the concerns of Americans, especially the black community, about the tactics used by police and the death of so many black Americans at their hands. And that is why the president instead has struck up this law and order tone. In fact, he had a conference call today with many state governors. He called them weak for refusing to crack down on these protests. He has been almost singularly focused on the violent aspect of the protests and the people he feels are behind it, which he labels as Antifa, which is a far left-wing ideology. It's not a specific group, but he's also threatened to brand them as domestic terrorists. So it is perhaps not a surprise that he struck this heavy-handed tone today. But you're right, Donna, that question of how he deals with the healing, with the racial divide in this question, that looms over all of this, and few will be satisfied by strictly a militarized or heavy police crackdown across the country.
All right, Jackson Proskow near the White House tonight. Thank you. Outside Washington, tensions are also rising tonight. Eric Sorensen brings us more on the situation across the United States.
As protests across the U.S. have multiplied, a pattern has emerged. First, peaceful demonstrations daily against racial injustice.
We want change. It's been too long. How long are we going to take this?
But at night, that powerful message has become contentious. There has been violence and some looting. The police are seen as both tamping down and escalating tensions. But the profound pain African Americans feel is undeniable.
Imagine if it was your son on the ground screaming, "I can't breathe, help me."
A new autopsy commissioned by George Floyd's family has found he died of asphyxiation from neck compression and from officers on his back, contradicting the official autopsy that cited underlying health issues.
He couldn't breathe, asphyxia due to compression of the neck and of the back, and that's homicidal.
Many police are demonstrating their solidarity with protesters that the tactics used in Minneapolis do not represent all cops. Among those bridging the divide, Flint, Michigan Sheriff Chris Sorensen.
I took my helmet off to lay the batons down.
At a time like this, the U.S. president can be a force for calming a nation in crisis.
Radical left criminals, thugs, and others.
But many believe President Trump is politicizing the moment, attacking left-wing groups.
There are white supremacists.
Critics say Trump is ignoring international and right-wing instigators.
There are people who are burning down the institutions that are core to our identity.
All of this comes during the COVID-19 pandemic. Twin crises simultaneously. The unrest disregarding physical distancing, which could make the virus spread. And to some, there's no question which risk is greater.
If I walk on the streets and a cop doesn't like me, or I did something, or I look like I'm doing something wrong, he can shoot me right there.
The scale of the emergencies is unprecedented. The U.S. National Guard has called out more than 60,000 troops, the largest in its history. 17,000 National Guard mobilized for civil unrest, on top of 45,000 for the coronavirus response. But many celebrities are among those sympathizing and demonstrating. Ariana Grande joined a march in Los Angeles. Nick Cannon went to Minneapolis to protest. And Beyoncé posted this on Instagram.
No more senseless killings of human beings. No more seeing people of color as less than human. We can no longer look away.
For many African Americans, the coronavirus may be temporary. The fear of racial violence against them never ends. Eric Sorensen, Global News.